Hello, beautiful. And what I really want to know is what is good in your life today? I'm Kia, and this is another episode of the Female Veterans Podcast. Today, I have with me a very, very lovely lady. She served in the Army for 10 years, both reserve and active duty, and now she's a life coach and she helps female veterans to thrive in life, which you know is my passion and very, very close to my heart. So I could not wait to get her here so that we could talk about her story and share everything she's doing with you. Her name is Wendi Wray, and I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Hey, Kia, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for the opportunity to not only be here with you, but also with your listeners. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you here. So I'm going to jump right in because I'm dying to hear your story. What was boot camp like for you?
Yes, so believe it or not, I joined in 2007. I was 17, and I was anxious to to do something more outrageous, I want to say, than my peers, and being the only child at home, and also really being the only girl around in my family. I wanted to do something courageous, and the first opportunity I got was actually as a JROTC student, and I never thought I was going to join the Army. And when I did get the opportunity, I decided to enlist. And I remember my recruiter saying, "Well, if we have boot camp available this summer, are you willing to go?" And fast forward, of course, there was something available. It was a time of war, and first day was a complete shocker because I wasn't really expecting it. I did come from a home where my dad was very, very strict, but never in this way, right? Like people yelling at you, and I mean, they were just angry, and well, they seemed angry, but for me, it was at first scary. I was scared. And it took a couple of days for me to actually kind of understand that that was the environment I was in, that that's what I signed up for. But overall, I remember in my platoon, we were about four females. So it was very lonely, of course. Not a lot of females at that time. And it was, what was really challenging for me was this whole idea of being together all the time with someone because I was an only child. So for me, I had to adjust. I had to really understand that there was more than just me, and that now I was a part of a group. I was a part of another family. And I think that that's where the challenge started for me, because I was always alone, and I was okay that way. Although I will say I want to say more on the extrovert side, but training wise, I completely, or physically, I was completely out of shape. My first PT test was a 22-minute 2-mile, and I was completely embarrassed because I was the slowest one. So I remember my drill sergeant, he was maybe 2 inches taller than me, and I'm like 5'1". And he was a runner. So he pushed me. Like, I remember he pushed me so hard one day that I was literally, like, I was about to fall out. Like, I was throwing up. I was like everything. I was completely a mess. But thanks to him, I graduated with a 16:24 time 2-mile. So needless to say, it was painful. It was physically painful, but it really gave me the opportunity to learn more about finding myself. Because when I got done with training, I had to go back to high school. So I could honestly say that it really did change me in a way of leadership. Like I felt more confident. I was able to make more decisions easily without having to consult my parents or really, having to consult with my mom. So it really gave me that independent mindset. And I am brave and I have confidence. So overall, I want to say I made the best decision at 17 to go to basic training.
Wow, that's incredible. So, did you make a lot of connections? Because you said that um, you were fine by yourself, and then you were in this environment where you're with people all the time. First of all, can I just say, I felt that. I feel that. Not that I was an only child. It's just that it was like when I got to boot camp and it was like this open bay room where I'm going to sleep in the same giant room as everybody.
Yeah.
And then you go into the bathroom and you've got a shower with these girls and then there's no doors on the bathroom stall. So it was like that lack of privacy. That was the culture shock for me. So it sounds like you had a culture shock too.
Yes.
And were you able to make connections with the girls? Is my question.
Yes. So there were two girls that I remember. I know we were both scared, so we were nervous. And I had one battle buddy. I can't remember her last name now, which is so sad. But my pretty much like assigned battle buddy. She was the opposite. She was fearless. She was just ready to do whatever she was told to do. The other gal, again, she was like me. Like we kind of connected because we were both scared. We were both kind of timid and shy, and but other than that, I think we weren't together per se. Having a good time, right? Because we had, time hacks. We had hard times where we needed to be. So I think, and also what at least didn't help me was that they moved on. So they went to AIT, and I was the only one in my company that was what we called, I believe it was, I completely just forgot the name, but I was a split option. That's what it was, a split op. So that meant that once graduation came, I was back into the regular civilian world.
Wow, that is really unique. I mean, I delayed my enlistment, but I did, boot camp and everything straight through. So I can't imagine what it would be like to be a split op. Like just you're thrust into that environment for a period of time, and then you go back to normal. It's like culture shock and then culture shock again. Right. But you're completely different after that. There's no way you're going back to the person you were before you went to that, but then you're back in that world. So that's really unique.
Yeah. And I think that, at least for me, it helped me because it gave me like a break, but it wasn't a break of the physical aspect because I was knowing that I was that out of shape. I was actually motivated to go back to AIT and get like a 300 on my PT score. So I was pushing myself physically in JROTC. I was in the Ranger team. I did everything I could to get physically better and improve and not get out of shape before going to AIT. So I think for me, the break was, again, my privacy and being able to, I don't want to say prove myself, but give myself that sense of pride that now I'm a different person. And I was just more confident.
Yeah, that's amazing. Right, boot camp does give you a certain confidence, I think.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if there were any girls that would go home after boot camp or after, for us it was A school in the Navy, that would go back and be the same. Because I know when I finally went back after I became staff on active duty after A school, I was like, everyone was like, "Oh my God, you're so different," and I'm like, "Am I?" And they're like, "Yeah, you're so different." And I'm like, "Well, I guess I should be, right?" So they did their job. So tell me, what was your active duty experience like?
So overall was great. Sometimes, I don't know if you've been asked, but if you could do it all over again, would you do it? And for me, it's yes. And because it was literally living the full human experience, right? And I think it was living the human experience times 10, or maybe we could even say times 100, because while you're in, or at least for me, I really didn't know the difference between 7 in the morning and 1 p.m. in the afternoon, because everything happened, everything, my schedule was always filled, which was great, but also there was life, right? There was, my husband, we had just had our first child the first year we were in. So it was a complete roller coaster as a woman, as a mom, as a leader. And which, by the way, I was at Fort Bragg. So I don't know if you know this, but in the Army, we have what we call the Center of the Universe installation in Fort Bragg in Fayetteville, North Carolina, is the center of the universe for the Army, because everything happens so fast there. I mean, if you're not in training, you're deploying. If you're not deploying, you're training for a training event. So there's always something going on. And I think for me, the beautiful thing about that was that I was able to not only appreciate every single moment that I had with my husband and with my daughter and my son after 2 years later, but I think it made me a better leader, because I was able to understand my soldiers in so many different levels, or at different levels and in different aspects, right? So yes, there were so many hard days. There were, I want to say, more hard days than good days, because every day was a challenge. I was a human resource officer, so my job was to serve people and interact with people every day. And I love people. The only caveat about that is that there are things that need to be done to take care of people, right? So, when one thing kind of falls off the or gets dropped, there's a ripple effect. So now, I'm in charge of an entire organization of 800 people. So, the challenge isn't only, working for your boss and making sure that the numbers are right, but also dealing with real life events, right? Like people going through a divorce, people not getting paid, soldiers not showing up, or possibly, they're having, problems at home, right? So everything kind of still comes back to my office. So I want to say that those were the most challenging times, when you have some control over what you can do to serve them, but then there's also times where you just don't have any control. And at the end of the day, I want to say that for me, as a human and as a woman, I was always wanting to do more, or try to go above and beyond, so that they could continue to do their mission, right? Like the infantry guys or the logistic guys. So overall it was a great experience.
That's a lot. Because human resources is sort of managing people. And like you said, people come with all sorts of intricacies and issues and real life problems. So it must have been, I imagine, quite a juggling act to manage all of that, all of those different personalities and those different situations. And then still, you have all your reporting, you have all your like day-to-day tasks for the role, because you also have a boss and you also have subordinates. So there's so much going on. I don't know how you had kids and a husband.
I know, right? And which, by the way, my husband was also in the military. So we were both in the military trying to do our job, but also trying to do it in the best way possible, because we're both very driven. We we're both, I mean, not only excited to be at Fort Bragg, because I think that's where everyone strives to go to as an officer, especially if you're a paratrooper. I think we were both just hungry for the opportunity that we had.
That's beautiful. To be in such a epicenter and to be able to work there and thrive there. It sounds like you had a fun time. Would you say that you had a fun experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every time I my husband and I, or one or the other, had to stay late because we had a night jump or training event, I think that was the fun part, right? Like, I think being at the office, especially for me, that was not the fun part. Sitting behind a desk, where you could be out there with your soldiers. I think for me, that was always the fun. Training for JRTC, for different events, or getting ready for the global response team. I think that was the fun part. I loved going to PT, as crazy as that sounds. That was my, I want to say, my, like, my motivation for every day, because you get to interact with them, right? You get to see where some soldiers are weak in, right? And even with myself, like I said, I was never the fastest runner, so I knew that was my weak area, and I wanted to get better, and I wanted to encourage my soldiers to get better as well. Although in Fort Bragg, we are known to run every day. We're known to run 4 miles at least every day. So for me, that was just the fun part, and interacting with them and learning more about them. I think that was just fun. I think that the community and relationship that you build when you're in active duty, it's just, you can't find that anywhere else. It's just priceless.
That's amazing. So I know that you were in the reserves also for 5 years. So tell me, what was the biggest difference for you between the two?
Oh gosh, um, and I hope your listeners don't get offended, but it is the truth, right? And how I know is because I worked for, like I said, 5 years. I was in the reserves, and then I went active duty. And the biggest thing is really discipline, because when you're in the reserves, you're only obligated the 1 week in a month or 2 weeks throughout the year, right? So I think that is what the biggest difference is, because they're not there every day, right? So the consistency isn't there. And I think that being in the reserves for 5 years, I kind of felt like I was just, I enjoyed it, but the community wasn't as tight because we didn't see each other every day. So we didn't know much of our issues, or the good and the ugly. We kind of just knew the good during that weekend, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does actually. Totally makes a lot of sense. I think when you are on active duty, it's just you're there on that base. That base is like a small universe, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you get to know most of everybody, or at least see them in passing, know who they are. And you have all the gossip that happens, but you also have all the drama and all the good things that happen and all the fun and the connection. So there's that, we always say it, that sense of camaraderie, that just, it's the
Right.
community, it's that community environment that you're in, especially if you live in base housing or on the base, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So tell me, what was your biggest obstacle that you faced while you were serving?
So because we are human, right? Because I think that what we do in the military, I know for the most part, I can't speak on behalf of other branches, but I know for the Army, we try to put our humanness and our mission together, right? Like our job and our personal life in one, but we really don't. And I think that was a challenge for me, right? When I was at Fort Bragg, my husband and I already had our daughter, but we found out we were expecting again. I want to say 6 months while we were already there, and being in an environment where it was go go go. Not that I wasn't taking care of myself, but I just wasn't. I wasn't worried about my pregnancy. I wasn't worried because I'm like, oh, I've had a child before. We're just doing this all over again, right? But life happened, and unfortunately, we lost our child at 20 weeks. So everyone knew that we were expecting. I mean, I was in my maternity uniform, and again, it was one of those things that it was just life. There was nothing that I could have done. The doctors scientifically told me that, this happens. They gave me the percentage. And long story short, it was something that I wasn't ready for, right? It was something that no one was ready for. No one in my family, and no one had gone through this. So for me, it was one of the challenges, parts of my life, because I didn't know how to show up, because I was just so emotionally just broken. I was completely destroyed in an emotional aspect. Intellectually, I knew that I had the skills to be resilient enough to go and get up and get after it. But emotionally, I didn't know how to deal with it. So for me, it was an experience that really messed with my mind, right? And
of course.
Yeah, because again, I'm not saying that we should be ready for this, but it was just something that never in a trillion years thought that was a possibility, even though we know that it's a possibility, right? But
right, of course.
Yeah, so I think that as a leader, or as the person that I was, it kind of affected my leadership. And this is why I kind of went into nothing else matters right now, which was a good thing because I was coping, but also it kind of took me away from what really mattered. And what really matters is, my family, right? Myself being healthy and my family being healthy. So instead of me, going back to my why I was serving, I completely just went into like a depression, and I was trying to avoid my depression by working a lot. Like, I mean, overdoing and just doing it because I was just trying to avoid it. And I didn't know that at the time, right? And then the way it affected my leadership style was because now I became a micromanager. I was, in everything. Like, I want to know what you're doing. I want to know what you're doing, because I wanted to do and do and do. Because again, I had lost interest in making myself or getting myself out of this depression, because I'm like, no, I am not depressed. I have everything. It's in the past. I'm going to move forward and I'm going to work. Right. So I think that, as a leader, I will say that I for a year, I was the leader, the supervisor that I'm pretty sure none of my soldiers really appreciated me, because again, I was a micromanager. I was not focused on the well-being of my soldiers. I was okay if they stayed late. I actually wanted them to stay late with me, right? So again, I wasn't showing up as who I truly was, because I was trying to avoid all of that. And as a woman, it's hard to truly understand ourselves unless someone tells us, right? And then again, we're like, no, you don't know what you're saying. Like, I know me, and I'm going to be okay because I am tough, and I'm an officer, and I don't have time right now, and I'm going to get through this, right? So I was just very stubborn. So I want to say that was the most challenging, because I just lost sight of who I was and why I was doing it. But thankfully, I did come out of that. And of course, other challenging moments, when you have people around you that take their life, those are challenging moments, because you want to be there for them, right? You want to be a part of the community that we're so tight, right? We're in a community that we're so tight that when you lose your brother or your sister, it becomes very, it gets heavy, right? And I think that those moments were very challenging, especially, being an HR officer. We know all of this, we know what's happening, and we know a lot of the issues that we're having, and kind of like not having any say or control around that is what was bringing a lot of the challenging moments.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot. So let me break this up into two.
Yeah.
Let me go back to the loss of your baby. And I just want to say that I'm so sorry that you had to experience that. I don't think that there's any way that any of us can be prepared for that. And it's like you said, we do know that it happens, but when it happens to you, it's so vastly different. It's a shock, and there's no way to be prepared for it, right? And so it's something that you do have to mourn, because it's a big loss, and it doesn't affect any two women the same way, right? And so I think that it shows like a lot of strength for you, and self-awareness for you to say exactly how it affected your leadership style, and that it, because you were not dealing with your emotions, made you become a micromanager and sort of make everyone miserable around you, because you were so focused on not feeling those emotions and dealing with them, and just telling yourself, yeah, I'm tough, I got this, I'm in control. Like, I'm not going to be depressed, I'm not going to lose time over this, but the whole time losing time by just not facing it and using work as an escape. And so I've certainly done that. So I am guilty, okay, of using work as a way to not face feelings that I don't want to face. So that is just something that I personally can identify with, and understand that as a coping mechanism, that's not the most healthy. Right.
Yeah.
And but the fact that it only happened for a year, which a year can be considered a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not. So for you to have worked through that in a year's time and come out the other end of it is really actually amazing, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to say that's really impressive, the way that you were able to sort of get on a healing journey after only losing a year to battling with those intense emotions and that significant loss.
Yeah. And, it wasn't, it's not that I was aware in the moment, right? Because, we're kind of like fish in water, right? We're not aware that we're in water. So it was after the fact, until later that year, my husband and I were literally about to just call it quits, because it was, again, right? Like, he knew that he didn't know exactly what I was going through, but he knew that there was something that I was trying to avoid. So I never wanted to talk about it. So the communication that he and I had then at home was, we really no communication. And let's not forget, I had a toddler, right? So it was, that's how or I want to say that's why it was only a year, because, my husband was thankfully, there to kind of help me see it, right? Help me see that this isn't helping. It's not helping you. It's not helping us. It's not helping anyone, right? So, it took a while for me to, I want to say a total of 3 years for me to really see it. That year was kind of like, okay, now I have to go to counseling.
Right.
That was my step one.
The healing journey begun.
Yeah, the
after
healing
a year.
journey. Yeah. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, and it was just that moment of, wait a minute, this isn't about me, because I was really trying to show everyone, like, hey, I'm okay, right? Like that was what I really wanted, because they knew I was expecting, they knew I had lost a child.
Right.
So it was no surprise. So for me, it was like, I'm going to show everyone that I will move forward and this is not going to faze me, right? But I was doing the total opposite.
Right. Wow. Yeah. That's huge. But again, we all begin our healing journey when we begin it. And I will say that, and with no judgment, there are many of us who it takes much longer to even begin the process of going through our healing, depending on what we went through and everything. So, I mean, I still think it's pretty fortunate that your husband was there to really show you after a year that, hey, this is not going in a good direction, and that you were open and receptive enough to start on that path of getting the help you needed. And in turn, being able to turn things around and become the leader that you truly were for your soldiers. And then you talked about suicide and losing soldiers on active duty to death by their own hand. And I think that we all know that suicide, especially in the veteran community, is a huge thing. I know they say it's the 22 a day, but we all, like, in our hearts feel like it's more, right? And that it's like an old statistic, and will someone please update that? But the point is, it's in active duty. This is not the first interview I've done where one of my guests talked about a suicide that impacted them while they were serving, right? And it's just heartbreaking when you have to be aware that someone was suffering and that there was like nothing you could do to help them. And of course you would have done anything, right? So I can imagine how that was like a compound of dealing with loss and death and emotion that you had to face while you were serving on active duty.
Yeah. And, I want to say, for all your listeners that, if they're going through or if they've been through an experience of loss, and, there isn't a like you said, there is no way to grieve like another person, right? Like you take that journey on your own, and it's at your own pace. And what I want to offer, and hopefully this does help someone, another female veteran out there, if it's you, if it's another soldier or another female veteran, and that there's that there has been a loss, or that they're struggling emotionally, I think that the best thing that we can do is be completely honest, right? Because I think if it weren't for my husband being completely honest and willing to risk our relationship, right? Willing to tell me the truth, even though that's not what I wanted to hear, or it wasn't comfortable for him to say, it was honestly the best thing, because again, that's what started. That was really the beginning of my healing process. And, every day I was suffering. I mean, I would just break down sometimes in the bathroom on my way home. I would, I couldn't even think of that day that I would just break into tears. So I want to say that you will know if you're suffering. You will know if you're, like you said, not wanting to face those emotions. And if this is you, you know, you can be honest with yourself, or allow that person, you know, to be honest with you, because sometimes we want to push them away as well. So, you know, the biggest thing would just be to be willing to risk that relationship, or just be willing to hear the truth.
It's amazing and very, very, very true. So, I mean, I know I went through it with postpartum, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. And my family, they did an intervention on me. And
Wow.
it was like 2 years after I had my baby that they sat me
Wow.
down. And my best friend, Melanie, actually, she was the first ever guest on the Female Veterans podcast. She said to
Yeah.
me, "You have not smiled in like 2 years. I have made an appointment for you at the VA. I'm going to drive you
Wow.
there on Thursday." It was like
Yeah.
a whole, and I was just stunned. I'm like, "What are you guys talking about?" Then they're like,
Yeah.
"Nope, you put weight on. Like you're
Yeah.
sad. You
Yeah.
don't smile anymore. You're not interested in any of your old activities. Like something is going on. You
Yeah.
had a baby and you've never been the same. So something's going on and you need some help." So really, I didn't want to hear it. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I was
Yeah.
fine. I was fine. I
Yeah.
was keeping that baby alive, girl. Like I was doing my thing. And but they were right. They were right. I
Yeah.
needed help. And I
Yeah.
went and got the help. I went to counseling. I took meds for like 2 years. They really helped
Yeah.
me. And I'm not a big proponent of meds typically. I do prefer holistic health these days. But they helped, and sometimes you got to do what helps, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was able to get off of them like I think 2 years later, and move forward with my life. But sometimes you need that. So you need that person
Yeah.
that's willing to go, "Hey, listen, I know you don't want to hear it. I was mad. I thought they
Yeah.
were lying." Like it was a
Yeah.
whole range of emotions. And she
Yeah.
didn't, it wasn't like they were like, "You have an appointment on Thursday." No, she was like, "I made you this appointment. I'm driving you."
I'm
Like I'm
driving you
saying, like
there.
you are going, like there's no getting out of it.
Yeah.
So, and I was not happy. I felt really imposed upon at the time. But you know what?
Yeah.
They were right. They were right to do
Yeah.
that. And who
Yeah.
knows? They may have saved my life. I mean, I was really depressed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Like, and you brought up a great point with, you gained some weight. I did too. And I was like, no, I didn't. And, but then I realized, I was like, wait a minute, I had to buy a new set of uniforms. Right. And in my
Mm-hmm.
head, because we're so in it, we
Mm-hmm.
just don't see it. And we're like, okay, maybe we just gained 5 pounds, but it was more like 30. Like that's what it was for me.
Mm-hmm. Oh
And
no,
so,
yeah, that's a lot. That's a
yeah,
lot.
yeah. So, when you have that friend, or, I think now is, especially during these times, I think as military women, especially active duty, right? Looking out for one another, because
Yes.
we know, right? We know when something's wrong. Like we
Yep.
can sense it, and based on, what they're doing or not doing, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, your friends were like, "Hey, you're not into the same things you were doing before the baby." Now you're like, "Nope, not doing it," because you're not realizing that you're not interested, right? Your interest level just went completely down.
Yeah, and you don't think anything's like you just changed a little, but like,
Yeah.
but really, I mean, especially with the whole weight thing, like I believe that no judgment, however you feel best is, and you're healthy is your
Right.
your way for you. But prior to that, I was working out 3 times a day. Like prior to getting pregnant, I was all about
Yeah.
fitness, right? So it was,
Yeah.
I even did like some fitness modeling when in my 20s. Like I got pregnant at
Wow,
30.
that's awesome.
So like just a little bit, but like I was very into it is my point.
Hmm.
So for me to like let all that go, to have all, suddenly after I have a baby, not be interested in any of the things that I'm interested in, it's just they were recognizing, and it's still, they let it go on for 2 years. They like gave me time to like come out of it
Yeah.
on my own, and I just wasn't. So I think, like you said, especially us as veteran sisters, we also have the experience of it. Like my friend was in the military, we served together. And we have the experience of a different environment, and we have other types of training, right? And so we're
Yeah.
more astute, we're more aware of the details. We have a lot more attention to detail. And so if you're looking at your friend and you're realizing things are off, or your veteran sister, then you know what to do. You know that you
Yeah.
got to be honest. You know that you got to say, okay, listen, my keen eye and my training
Yeah.
tells me that this is something's wrong here. I've got to do something. And I think if we can see that, because sometimes you don't see it until it's too late, and then the person is lost. But if we're looking and we're aware and we're honest, maybe we can prevent some of our friends from getting to the point where they just don't want to be here anymore. And I think
Right.
that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, wow, that was incredible. And thank you so much for sharing that. Really deep stuff. And I just have another question for you that I ask all my female veterans. As a young officer, right? And you said that you're 5'1", so to me, you're a tiny woman.
Yeah,
I'm not I'm
I
five
know.
nine. Or
You're
well,
considered normal.
5'9" in heels. 5'8". I'm 5'8" and like a quarter. So
Yeah. I always round up.
I like to round up as well, right? So, but for me, I think that I love small women. I have this thing with my co-host for Hot Topics Live, my live stream show on Facebook, that she's a tiny woman and I call her a little doll. So I love that. But as an officer in the military, did you experience any sort of issues with the guys, like either with your subordinates or superiors, where you had to deal with any like misogyny or anything like that while you were serving?
So thankfully, I didn't, and
Awesome.
I want to say, that I think for me, I was more intimidated sometimes, but it wasn't in a way of I don't think it was because they were bigger than me, because I did. I remember one of my soldiers, and I still talk to him, still, every now and then, just to see how he's doing. And he's like 6 feet tall, right? And I show up to the organization, and I'm like pretty much saying, "Hey, we're gonna work together," and I'm kind of like in charge here, right? So at first, I was a little intimidated because, again, it was still very new to me, to the organization, to have. I was actually a first lieutenant promotable, so I was promotable, but I wasn't a captain yet in '03. So I think that's where the intimidation came from, because I knew that I was still young, or not young, but a young officer. I was in '03 yet. I was still in '02 promotable. So for me, I think that's what it was. But I mean, I've been truly blessed. I've had the most respectful, hardworking NCOs, soldiers, paratroopers that I've worked with, and my supervisors as well. I want to say that I have been blessed. They've encouraged me. They have actually pushed me. They pushed me, maybe because I was 5'1", but it was, I think, the most grateful experience that I have. Unfortunately, I can't, or not many of us can say that, right?
Right.
But I will say that I want to say that I may be one of the few that didn't have that, or those situations.
I love that. I can't get enough of that. And fortunately for me, doing this show, it's not that common of an occurrence, or maybe just I don't have enough girls with those experiences coming forward to share their stories yet.
Yeah.
But if you have them, I want to hear them, because this podcast is about the good and the bad. And so that
Right.
my hope is that young girls who are considering going into the military will listen to, and then they'll get like the perspective of real stories, that they can make an educated decision from listening to the show. So I love that. I think
Yeah.
that's an amazing display of good leadership for Fort Bragg. right?
Yeah.
Because we don't, like, even now, like, it's common, we're hearing more and more about commands that have struggling leadership and that are horrible to be stationed at. So I think that's amazing. I'm actually really excited to hear that you had such a good experience. It's beautiful. So tell me, what was your transition out of the military like?
Oh gosh. So it was, so before, I guess making the decision was the hardest part for me because
Mhm.
I was actually happy, right? Like I was actually happy with my job. I loved the structure. I loved the routine. Again, I was a part of this community, this new family. So I didn't really want to leave it. But then I had to make a decision because I was either I get out or I um, PCS. Sorry, I'm forgetting the terms here. It's only been 3 years, but either I, change duty station, and for me, it was again going back to what do I really want, right? Like, what is it that Wendi wants? Not, Wendi the mom or Wendi the wife or Wendi the officer in the army or whatever I considered myself at the time, and in deep within me, I knew that there was something more that I wanted to do. And I don't mean that being in the military is not enough. That's not what I'm saying. But what I mean is that I wanted to do something other than serving in the military. And I think that for me, my 5 year mark came and it was time for me to go. I didn't want to because the uncertainty was there, right? Like, what job am I going to get, or what is it that I'm going to do, because I didn't know. So I think for me it was a time to explore who I really was and who I wanted to become, because it wasn't going to be Captain Wray anymore. It was Wendi. Wendi's actually going to be this new person, right? Because I had to retrain my mind on who I really was and what routine I was going to do, what job. And I think for me, it was a great experience because I found myself, at least for the most part, during that transition. But it was scary. It was definitely scary. It kind of reminded me of going in to the military. So it was like the complete opposite. But I was still scared because now, instead of going into this community, I was getting out of the community. And so that was terrifying for me because that's all I knew for the last 10 years.
Yeah, I vibe with that. I mean, my last day, I was so excited. It was like graduating college or high
Yeah.
school, like whatever. I mean, it was such the best day. And my command made it incredible for me. I got a letter of appreciation from the captain. Like, my whole department threw me a party. Like, it was really, really, I
Yeah.
mean, but at the same time, and I knew from the time I went to boot camp that I knew that this was the foundation for my life. But I, like you, was like, I need to know who I am though after that. Like, there's something more
Right.
for me to do after that. It's not a career for me. So having known
Right.
that from my first day of boot camp, that I was excited and looking forward to my last day. It was like I was marking the days off the calendar, even though I was having all these experiences that were cool while I was in. So when that day came, it was like, the day is here. It's like graduation day. But at the same time, I remember driving away from the base and just feeling like sick, almost like
Yeah.
this combination of like sadness and
Mm-hmm.
fear of the
Yeah.
unknown, and just like feeling like, did I make the right choice? Like, those guys were like my
Yes.
family. I have been seeing them every day for years. Like, what is my life gonna be like? Who am I anymore without this? And it was just really such an experience, that final moment, on my way home. So I definitely understand where you're coming from. I think we all do. We all can understand that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you were prepared for civilian life from the TAPS class? Or did you take it?
I did take it. It was a requirement. I was at Fort Drum in New York when I was transitioning, and they did. This was 2017, so we had the Hire Heroes. There were so many opportunities or resources available, but that was only for the career aspect, if that makes sense. So it was kind of like, here's another career for you. Here are the other careers. Here's other possibilities, right? But I didn't feel prepared as a person, individual again.
Right.
I wasn't prepared as Wendi. Like, okay, what role am I? Now I'm going to be mom and wife, and I can get a job. For me, it wasn't, I need to go make $100,000 a year, right? It was more like I just want a career. So I think what I didn't feel prepared in was just having a conversation with another person that wasn't in the military, right?
Right.
Not that we're like aliens or anything, but it's different.
But it is different. It is.
But it is different, right? Like it's like we're on, like you mentioned earlier, we're in our own universe. We have our own terms that we use and language, and I don't know how to explain it.
Everything.
Yeah, jokes. Yeah, right. I mean, the way we dress, and it's just, again, like a culture shock going into, now you're like, how to be, right? You know how to dress because you have weekends, but you don't really know how to dress every day. It's like, I can dress to go out for dinner and go hang out with the girls, but I just don't know how to do this whole suit thing, or, what kind of blouse am I, the heels and all of that.
Attire situation for work.
Yeah. And then, the conversations, right? Like, oh, she's in the military. But thankfully, I actually was, again, blessed with, I had this opportunity. I was a recruiter. So I work with military guys, and I helped veterans find a job. So I was pretty much a recruiter, but that helped me a little. But other than that, it was just a culture shock again. Like you said, you just get like this emptiness, and then kind of you kind of feel lost, because you're like, okay, who can I ask for help that isn't going to call me out, or, you don't want to feel embarrassed or shame for not knowing, right, certain things that is pretty normal to everybody else.
So what do you think helped you adjust the most?
To be completely transparent, I want to say coaching, life coaching. And the reason being is because I hired a life coach when I was at Fort Drum, because I felt lost, and I didn't know who I was, and I wanted help in that area. So I hired my first life coach in 2017. I want to say it was June of 2017. And if it wasn't for the tools that I attained during that time, I think it would have been more challenging, but also I would have been going in a whole nother direction. It would have been a great career path, but not the direction that I knew I wanted to be in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you hired a coach, and now you say your adjustment was helped by coaching. So you hiring a coach, was that what led you on your path to becoming a coach?
So I wanted to be a coach. I remember Googling this because I like I said, I went to therapy from 2014 all the way to 2016. So for 2 years, I was going to counseling therapy, and I can't remember if it was a commercial. I remember hearing the word life coach, and I remember Googling it like 2015, 2016, and I was like, that sounds like a great job, right? Like, it just, you just focus on the future, and you focus on achieving your goals, right? And I'm like, I love doing that. So for me, like, I kind of knew I wanted to be a life coach, but I just didn't know like what kind of life coach, or didn't really know what it really meant for me at the time. So that's why I hired a life coach, because I wanted to know more. I'm like, okay, this whole life coaching thing, everyone is talking about it, and or at least some of my friends were talking about it. And I hired my life coach, and she completely changed the way I was thinking, or at least, change my perspective on how much of an impact it is. So after that, I was completely sold because my life had completely changed.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, I don't always mention it on this particular show, but I do coach. And the thing for
Yeah.
me is at London Real Academy. And the thing for me is I have classes, right? So I coach maybe anywhere from, it could be 10 to 50 people or so, give or take, at a time, and for 8 weeks. And watching the transformations happen is
Mm-hmm.
such an incredible part of why I do what I do. And I say that because I first went through the academy. So
Yeah.
having the experience, like you said, of watching your life change and your perspective change really is inspiring. And I could absolutely agree and see why you would then become a coach, because once you know that this is possible and that you can help other people do it,
Yeah.
you almost just want to. Right?
Yeah. You're like, this is what I want to do. Because
Yeah.
it's like you said, it's just such an amazing feeling when you went through it, and then now you're seeing other people go through it, and you're like, this works, right? Because it does. And when you figure that out, it's like mind blowing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a bit about your business then, because I know that you help female veterans. Coaching is like life for the both of us. I love that we have that in common.
Yeah.
And I actually coach female veterans, but in a different capacity. I coach them through the Barbara Giordano Foundation, um,
Okay.
doing only specific workshops, and I donate that time to do that a few times out of the year when I can fit it into my schedule. But I want to know like what you do, how you
Yeah.
help veterans, and because obviously that's a more one-on-one and long-term type of way that you can coach for them. So let's talk
Yeah.
about it. I want to hear everything.
Yeah. So I coach military women, and I help them retrain their mind. So pretty much help them understand that all of the suffering that's happening, or the change that isn't happening, is because of how they're thinking or how we've been wired to think, right? So it's, for me, again, like I said, it was a mind blowing experience from when, the day one of being coached. My first session, I was like, yeah, what you just said, I've never heard anyone say before. And I completely agree, right? Well, it wasn't really like that, but because I wasn't taking responsibility for what I had created in my life. And I think that, or the reason that my focus is military women, is because, again, I know that there's a lot of suffering, a lot of emotional pain, on a day-to-day basis, regardless if it's, dealing with work or dealing with family or just dealing with personal identity, because we lose that. We really do when we go in the military, because we become this whole nother person. We completely transform because that's the way we get trained, right? So for me, really focusing on military women was, I want to say, the best decisions I made too, because I see my clients now, and I've had clients, NCOs, O3s, and right now I'm coaching an O5, and the things that we've uncovered, not only blew her mind but blew my mind, because she's not the only one, right? So now I'm like driven to help more and more women out there, because again, it doesn't have to do with, relationships. It doesn't have to do with even work, right? It could be letting go of a bad habit. It could be, overcoming this emotional pain that you've had for so long, and you just don't know how to deal with it. And the work that I do is pretty much help them. I give them the tools, I give them the steps on how to manage your mind and how to create new, what I like to call paths within our mind, you know, neurotransmitters, to help us understand that we have full power. We have full control of our feelings. No one else does but ourselves, right? We get to decide that for ourselves. And I think that a lot of the times we give that away. We give that power away to someone else, thinking that they caused it, or it's because of this situation that I'm feeling this way. But it's really because of the thoughts that we have about that, right? So helping them uncover that is, it just brings me so much joy. When I do my coaching sessions, I coach for a minimum of 3 months, because it is a process, right? It's 3 months or 6 months. And, you know, I think for me now, I want to say that I'm fully living the life that I never thought I would have or even experience, because helping these women, and like I said, at all different levels, it just brings me so much joy, because I know that they are going to instill that with their other soldiers. They're going to point that out. They're going to share that, and that's only going to make not only the veteran community better, but also the women community.
Ooh, I got chills, because you know it really is like a trickle, right? It's a ripple effect. It trickles down, then it ripples out, and it just, the impact of passing on information that helps people heal and grow and thrive has just a really far-reaching impact when it continues to share and share and share and share. And it's a really beautiful thing that you're doing. So what is the name of your organization?
Yes, sorry. So it is, so Wendi Wray Coaching, but I have a program. So there's 2 ways that I coach: either a one-on-one coaching, which is just Wendi Wray Coaching, right? A 3-month program, a 12-week, 3-month program, or also my Beyond Her Military course, Beyond Her Military Uniform course, that actually hasn't officially launched, but will launch in October 19th. And currently I am doing kind of like the pilot program, right? Because we always want to do that first. So it's a 6-week course that they'll be able to do at their own pace. So it's a 6-week program that, you know, they get pretty much the modules, the how-to, the actual exercises, and that's Beyond Her Military Uniform within itself. But again, that will be launched October 19th. But for now, it's still one-on-one coaching, and that is just Wendi Wray Coaching. And I pretty much do all of my events, or I'm pretty active on Instagram. So a lot of my videos are there, my content.
Perfect. So that sounds like an amazing new course you're developing. I know that you mentioned you have a webinar coming up. Can I get more details on that?
Yes, thank you, Kia. So the webinar is going to be on October 13th, and it's a mind management masterclass. So it's going to be, and I literally couldn't sleep last night because I'm just so excited. I have all these other ideas that I'm, coming up with, and not only it's really going to be transforming 1 hour of a lot of information, but also a lot of tools that you'll be able to take home with you as well. And there will be a giveaway. So it's going to kind of be the giveaway of my course. So the introduction of my course, pretty much. So for all the ladies out there that are able to attend, I will be giving out, for right now, I think we have scheduled 5 giveaways. But again, depending on how many women we have, I am willing to give as many free courses to the women that attend. So for any of you that are struggling with, not knowing your full identity, or struggling with procrastination, overwhelming anxiety, this is for you, because I will share the tools on how you can start overcoming that without taking the pills, like you mentioned earlier, right? Because most of it we can do internally.
Beautiful. That sounds exciting. I hope that everybody will go check it out. It sounds like it's going to be a really insightful masterclass and that you'll get a lot out of it. I might pop in there. I'll see. Giving away
Yeah,
free stuff.
please. Yeah, yes, for
Seriously.
sure.
I
Yeah,
love that. I love that. And so we're going to wrap it up in just a minute, but I
yeah.
have two more questions for you.
Okay.
So my next question for you is, being that you're a coach and clearly have a lot of valuable information to share with our veteran sisters, I want to ask you, what advice would you give to our veteran sisters coming behind you that could help them thrive in life?
Yeah. So I think step number one is being aware of what's happening in your life, right? Like taking inventory. We don't do that a lot, right? We don't take a moment and take inventory of ourselves, because sometimes it may not be pretty, or sometimes we just have too much going on, that, or we think that we have too much going on, that we don't set time for ourselves. So that would be step one. And then step two, be honest with yourself and really ask yourself, am I in a place where I want to be? And if you don't, be honest about where you could be better, or where you could grow, or what you could change about you in a way that's going to continue to serve the people around you. And the last step would be to obviously take action, and not in a way of, okay, I'm going to go go lose 30 pounds today, or I'm going to stop drinking, for the next 30 days, but really coming up with a plan that's going to work for you. Because I think right now, especially during this time, we are in a time to be honest with ourselves, right? Like, do we need to reach out to our do we need to reach out to other people that we possibly need to reach out to, right? Like, do I need to reach out to more of my African American friends, to my Caucasian friends? How are they feeling? My military sisters, like, what is it that I could do to not only improve within myself, but also serve others, right? Because that's what we do. That's what we do as military women. We're there to serve, to lead. And believe it or not, we do that as soon as we step out into the civilian sector. We do that. It's just like our nature now, right? So I think that's, what I want to offer your listeners again is, take an inventory of you, of where you're at, and then just being honest with yourself. And the last thing, just to come up with a plan, create a small plan, and be very specific about it, and just get after it.
Love it. Love it. That's some great advice. Who's not taking her course? Are you kidding me?
Thank
No,
you.
really, really, really good advice. Get after it. Get after it.
Yeah.
So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that advice. Very well
Yeah.
said. And
Thank you.
my last question for you is, where can we find you? Now, I know you mentioned Instagram, but where
Yes.
can we find you to reach out to you? And everybody knows I'll put the links in the show notes in the description box so that you can find her more easily. So where is it?
Yeah. Yeah. So on Instagram, I am at Wendi Wray, but also you can find me at wendyray.com, and I will give you the actual link for a free session for all your listeners that want to take that first step, right? And really have that inventory check, or, want an actual strategy. The link is wendyray.com/free session. But again, I'll send that to you so you can link it in the notes.
Perfect. I'm so excited. And actually, I will include that link when I do my social blast for this episode as well. So
Awesome.
I am so excited for that. Thank you for doing that for my listeners. I appreciate you. And I just want to take a moment to say it has been such a pleasure to talk to you, to hear your story, and to be able to share it with everybody. It has been lovely to connect with you today.
Thank you so much, Kia. Again, thank you to all your listeners for taking the time to hear my story. And I want to thank you again for being an example of what's possible, right? Not a lot of women are out here willing to share other women's stories. So I want to thank you for what you're doing, Kia. And I really know that this is empowering for other women and really taking that step to help them to voice their story as well. So truly, I am truly thankful and blessed to be here on your platform. And again, we all have a purpose. We all have something to give on this earth. And all your listeners, this is for you. And again, you know where to reach me. Thank you so much, Kia, for your time.
It's been my pleasure. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. I just want to say thank you to everyone who listens each and every week and who sticks with me on this journey. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. I appreciate you. I love you guys, and I will talk to you next time.